in the last lecture, we have studied Girish Karnad's Trublat, and even we talked about the two stories, right? One was actually bordering on the psychoanalysis, and the other was actually talking about the modern world. And today we will be talking about the poetry. I'll try to cover most of the poems. So today we'll be talking about the five poems, which has different themes, and hope it will help you in covering the poetry section in order to understand the different poetic creations resonated in a different languages. For example, we will study one Hindi, one Khasi, one Dogri, right? So I hope I'll try to cover as much as possible in this lecture. So today we'll be covering five poems in all. First will be the Requiem by K.S. Nonkingra, and then we will be discussing The Stair by Raghuveer Sahai, then The Moment of Courage by Padma Sachdeva, Kitchen by Vimla, and in the end we'll conclude our lecture with Just One's Try by Shakti Chattopadhyay, right? But before starting, I would like to know, Shushmita, have you read any of these poems in any of your text, or in during your post graduation, and are you familiar with any of these poems? That
No, ma'am.
okay. So first of all, without wasting the time, let's start with the Requiem, right? Let me share the screen so that you are able to see the text. I hope you are able to see the text, Shushmita. I
Yes,
hope.
ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. Without wasting time, let's just quickly jump on to the first poem, that is Requiem, right? So, as it is already written in the brackets that it was written in the Khasi languages. So, today we'll be trying to cover as much as regional languages that are actually possible, and we'll try to discuss, and we'll try to interpret the different thematic concerns that were actually resonating in the different regional languages, right? So, first of all, we're talking about the Requiem, right? So Requiem, it was actually a remembering Mary, and in the Khasi, and it was actually of a poet that was Kinpam Singh, that is, and then basically the poem was actually a kind of a lament poem, right? And the whole idea is centered around the idea of death, right? So whenever we talk about death, so death is something we really don't want to talk about it. And usually, the poems that who are concerning with the death, that the tone is usually very somber, serious, right? It has a kind of a universal appeal, but on the other hand, it leads to a lot of philosophical thoughts and a lot of contemplation within ourselves, because we all fear about death, right? Whenever we think about death, we don't want to even talk about it, right? So this was the reason that there was a complete different view that was offered by Emily Dickinson when she was writing, because I could not stop for death, right? But on the other hand, writers like Emily Dickinson, she was saying that how death is simply a kind of a pause, and there will be the concept of afterlife, where the spirit will enjoy the union with the ultimate God, and they will, and the spirit will ultimately find peace in the abode of the God, right? So the same way we will be talking about the idea of death here by by Kinpam Singh. And on the other hand, basically it is actually a dirge, right? Uh, when we were talking about the poetry on the death, so we will be very much familiar with one literary device, that is an elegy, right? So you must have heard about a lot of elegies, that is O Captain, or that's written on the death of Abraham Lincoln, that you must be aware of the an elegy written in the country churchyard, right? So you must have read such kind of a elegy. So basically a poem that is concerning about the death, the popular literary device that is used to write the lament poem, lamenting over someone's death, especially the death of a loved one, a closed one, somebody who is very dear, right? So in order to, why the need to write a lament poem, or the need to write elegy, is definitely, when we're talking about the catharsis, that there was so much repression in the repression of the emotions, that in order to let go of that emotion, in order to let go of that excessive sorrow and grief, in a way how writing is therapeutic. So by the way of helping of the writing, right? So you are able to let go of that feelings, right? But on the other hand, even when we're talking about the death poems. So apart from the elegy, there are lament, there are dirge as well, right? So dirge, dirge. You must be aware of the device, Sushmita.
Uh,
Dirge.
Dirge?
Dirge,
No, ma'am.
dirge. Okay, so basically, when we talk about the death poems, there were elegies, there were laments, and on the other hand, there were dirges. Well, the basic difference between elegy and dirge, though the similarity is that the both both kind of devices are used to lament over the death of a loved one. So basically, they were actually the lamentations, right? The lament poems. But the basic difference between a dirge and an elegy is that elegy cannot be written on a specific purpose. For example, I am talking, I'm just remembering about someone who is very dear to my heart, and I cannot get over the grief, or whenever I was remembering that person, so there was no specific occasion to write an elegy, right? And on the other hand, elegy should be written, right? So elegy is in the writing form. But on the other hand, when we talk about the dirge, so dirge is basically a kind of a poem that was orally read, right? So we must be familiar of the idea. Whenever we used to visit, and we have already talked about samaskara, right? The funeral rites, that how the last rites of a person will be carried, right, through all the under the all the norms of religion. Then you must be aware of the last day, right? The last day, whenever the kriya, the bhog of a person, was held, kind of a ceremony held on the you could say on the uh, in order to pay tribute to the dead. So there were people who were actually talking very good about the person, right? So there was a very
Ma'am,
yes.
elegy is written and dirge is orally recited.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Yes, and on the other hand, dirge is specifically, as I am telling you, that the whole idea of the dirge is, you must be aware of the very last function, the last ceremony of the death, right? So as I have already told you, the kirya, or a kind of a bhog ceremony, right? So there you must be aware of that, how people come on the mic in the large halls, and they try to speak very good things about the person, right? So they
Yes,
were
ma'am.
orally reciting a few of things. Sometimes they recite a poem, sometimes they recite few of the rhymic lines. So this is actually a dirge, right? So which was actually orally, right? So orally that was enacted, or you could say orally that was spoken on the funeral, right? So on the other hand, elegy has not any kind of a specific occasion, but on the other hand, dirge has a specific occasion. It was in the oral form, and moreover, it will be widely, you could say, read on the day of funeral, right? So on the day of funeral, or the last ceremony of the death, right? So it is like paying the by orally reciting it. It is like just saying the goodbye to the dead soul, right? The goodbye to the dead spirit. So I'll be talking about requiem. So requiem, it means remembering Mary. So basically the poem talks about the death of Mary, and they were actually remembering the Mary, right? So the poet is actually remembering Mary, right? A young woman who died because of unexplainable circumstances, and she died at such a young age. So there will be definitely talking about a lot of grief and pain in the hearts of the people whenever they think about the death of a young person, right? Because we used to say that the person the person has went with so many aspirations and so many unfulfilled dreams, right? So basically when we read the poem, so this was actually talking about of the three phases. First we will be venting over the Mary, we will think thinking about the Mary. But on the other hand, the poet, in the end, he was talking about that, how the reaction of the other people, right? How other people were lamenting over the death of the Mary. So it could be have a distancing effect, that he is able to see the death, he is able to judge the death. And on the other hand, in the last, right, by the concluding, we will get to see that how he is actually talking about very natural and very common phenomena, right? As I have already told you that that's said to be the great laboral, he's said to be the great equalizer. It comes to all, right? Nobody can be spared from the clutches of the death. So it is something which is natural, which is the ultimate truth, right? So we will be talking about the universality of the death, or inevitability of the death, by the way of remembering Mary, right? So I'll be reading. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line. nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. Umar Khayyam. So the actually, he quoted the lines of Umar Khayyam while starting the poem, that how the moving figure, so it can be the finger of God, right? So nobody can deny the orders, or nobody can, nobody can reject the actions that is actually put forward by the God. So he's saying, nor all the piety, nor shall lure it back to cancel the half lines, right? So we have to ultimately submit to the will of God when it comes to death, right? Though we try to give so many justifications, we regret, we ask for the explanation from people, from God, but on the other hand, there will not be any kind of a option that we can cancel the half line, right? The half line, this untimely death, this unexplainable death, and especially the death of a young man or a young woman, right? And that too in a very unpredictable circumstances. Nor all thy tears wash out a word of it, right? So on the other hand, he was saying, no matter how much you cry, no matter how much you shed your tears, you feel sorrowful, ultimately you have to get out of it, and ultimately you really need to submit to the word, right? Submit to the word of that the person is gone, right? So we all have come across the idea of death, right? When we actually realize the death of somebody who is very close to our heart, right? So somebody who is from relatives, from our cousins, and from here and there, especially those who are very much closer. We were talking about our age, right? When we were talking about the grandfather, grandmother, nana, nani, and whenever we even we have the direct, or you could say indirect, conversation, and a direct or indirect contemplation of the idea of the death, when we were seeing our our parents coming from attending the death ceremony of somebody, and having the white clothes on, and we'll get to know that, okay, this is something which is actually happened, though the person who died, right? So it just evaporates, right? That the definitely the memories will be there, but how we perceive death, that is by the death of somebody else, right? So the constant reminder that it will come to all, and it is the ultimate truth, and this is the most natural thing, and the inevitability of death, right? So it's the same way he was talking about, that the moans that floated into still autumn nights were borne by the cold winds onto the season of carols. I heard them nightly beating against the window panes like the disembodied tenebras pleading to be let in, right? So if you read the first stanza, you are able to get that the kind of images he was talking. As I have already told you, whenever we talk about elegy, lament, or dirge, right? So you will be having a very bleak images, right? The tone of the poem is very much somber and serious, right? So here the poet is actually he was quoting the idea of the still autumn nights, right? So in order to build up the concept of the death, in order to build the environment for something which was very serious like the death. So he was like, the moans that floated into the still autumn night, so the somebody is gone, and on the other hand, the people are mourning, they are crying, they are weeping, shedding so much tears, right? In these still autumn nights, when there is there is a complete silence, and the moans are the disrupting voices. The moans are the thing, right? The disruptive voices that is actually hinting towards something, there is a change in the nature, that is how somebody goes so naturally, right? And were born by the cold winds, and on the other hand, these winds are cold because the winds are not at all comforting the people who are suffering, right? The people who are grieving. So there is a kind of a cold blow, that is as if the winds are also hitting their body, the winds are also hitting their thoughts, the winds are also hitting their minds, right? They are not giving them any kind of a solace or peace, right? But on the other hand, it feels like that all the world is attacking, and this was the reason that the people who are actually lamenting over the death of someone, they feel more and more sorrowful onto the seasons of carols. On the other hand, as we have already talking about the autumn, and there are and Christmas is around the corner, and autumn, and moreover you must have read about Ode to Autumn by John Keats, that how he celebrates the idea of autumn, that how autumn is also a season of maturity, the fullness to the course. And on the other hand, he said that how he mentioned that how autumn is ultimately it's actually that is the paveway to the spring, right? So we really need to celebrate autumn. So he was the same way, he was quoting that though the idea of the celebration is round the corner, the season of carols, the season of the joyful songs will soon going to come. But how will these moans, right, that were actually floating on these nights, and with the help of the cold winds, the moans are so much so much of it's going on and on in high in intensity, because somebody has gone from the life of someone, right? I heard them nightly beating against the window panes like disembodied tenebras pleading to be Latin. On the other hand, he was, quoting the example that how, the constant pains, right, the constant pain, crying, weeping, and the moans were constantly coming from the window panes, and like some disembodied structure, something which cannot be avoided, he is pleading, right, so that these voices will ultimately subsidize. On the other hand, these voices will, ultimately, evaporate into the air. But on the other hand, we know it very well that how it is very difficult to, get over, get over the idea of the death of someone, especially if somebody is very closer to your heart. So the same way he was pleading that the such kind of a harrowing night, such kind of a harrowing moons will someday, subsidize, someday it will end. But on the other hand, the very first paragraph, he was talking about the impact, right, the impact of death, impact of the death of the Mary, that it has on the people, and how people are weeping, shedding their tears, how they are mourning, right. I heard them as I went to sleep, and heard them as the rooster sound its first call to the sun. So we know it very well that Mary is a young woman, so it is very difficult to get over the idea of the death of a young person. We have already discussed that how it is the most unfortunate thing that can be happen to a family, right? Because youth, or youngsters in a family, they were actually, they were actually the real hope of the family, right? And elders and kids, they visualize their future, or they enjoy their present, while having the image of the youth in their hand, when they look at their young boys and girls. So on the other hand, the same way, so this was the reason that the poet was saying that whenever I'm going to sleep, or I'm just waking up at the first call of the cock, as if the cock was actually, the rooster was actually starting his first call. So they were continuously weeping, they are constantly shedding tears, they were constantly grieving over the death of Mary, right? So this the whole idea builds up, the whole atmosphere builds up, that how not only death is something natural, but on the other hand, it is the most painful thing, right? Not only painful for the dead person, but on the person, right, that are left behind, right? So it talks about that how though death is the inevitable thing, but how we human minds, we are not at all, we are not at all ready about it. We are not at all ready to accept the idea of the death. We don't want to embrace the idea of the death, and even the thought of the death, right? So it actually causes shivers in our body, and how the people who were actually suffering from the death. And the one more thing I would like to mention, that it was just by the pain of the others, it was just by with the lenses of the other, when we perceived it, right? Because we know it very well, the first hand the experience with our death, one day it will come, and it will take our body and soul away from the world. But on the other hand, our mind is already preoccupied, or you could say familiar with the idea of the death, when we look at others, right? When we look at the death of the others, or the other hand, we look at the people who are grieving over the death of the other, right? So it was the first thing, the first, you could say, epiphany a person has, that how death is something which is a truth, it is something natural, and it is something which is very painful, right? I hope you are going with the same interpretation, you are able to get that whatever I'm saying, Shushmita,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
So in the next paragraph, he was talking about, I heard them as the clock summoned schoolboys to their text, and heard them as the muezzin loosed his adhan into the murky air. But on the other hand, there was a different kind of a shift, a shift of a tone in the writing of the poet. And there he was talking about that though the person has gone, but on the other hand, the other thing, right, the people will keep on doing their routine things, right? So whether it is going to be a rooster will sounded his first call. On the other hand, clocks are actually going on the same way. School boys are actually getting ready, they are going to the school, everything is going on the same pace, right? So it was like that, death will though death will come and take away the person in a moment, but on the other hand, the whole world will go on, right? So death is just one of the phase of the life, right? So it can be understood like that it is not the, as Emily Dickinson says, that it is not at all a full stop, right? It might be a pause, right? It might be a pause in the life of someone, right? So same way, the poet is also quoting the same thing, that how clocks are going on, students, school boys are going to school, whether it is going to be a muezzin who is actually reading namaz, he is actually calling people for the first call for the namaz, and loosed his azan into the murky air. And then he talked about that what was wrong with Mary. I heard them nightly beating against the window panes like this. uh, I believe I quoted the uh, same poem. Just a moment, just give me a moment. I believe there was a repetition. Right, so we will be talking about that, how what was wrong with Mary, right? So there at the point of a time he was talking that what was actually went wrong with the Mary, right? So the same thing then when we were talk about the death of a someone, the first thing that what is the actual cause of the death, right? So why that person, the person just went away, right? What is the reason behind the death of that person, right? I believe there are few overlapping. We'll go to the next paragraph, right? Her very name calls upon the god to protect, but there was mourning as naturally as sleeper snoring. No doctor came, right? And on the other hand, then whenever we talk about the death of somebody, what are the causes? What are the what has actually happened to the person, right? Was there any disease? Was there some mishappening? So now he was just talking about her very name called upon the god to protect her. On the other hand, people just was saying that may God protect the soul, may God just protect the spirit, and but there was a mourning as naturally as the sleeper snoring. But on the other hand, they were talking about that how she was how she was crying in the pain, she was weeping in the pain, right? So it was basically they were talking about the death of a young woman. But on the other hand, the sad reality, right, though he has written that no doctor came, right? So it also talks about the rural India, right? The rural places of the of the India, right? That how the people will more and more inclined on doing all the sort of things in order to in order to save the person. But on the other hand, they will not approach the medical help. And on the other hand, there are a lot of remote areas where no help came even, right? So it was all about how the whole tone, the murky symbolism that he was talking about, the silence, the autumn night, the cold wind. And now it comes back to the reality, right? So now a sane mind was actually thinking about, right, what could have happened to Mary, why he went away. And now people are actually praying for the for the solace of the soul. And now he was talking about that how what are the actually reasons, right? Had somebody saved Mary, she could have she could be living at that time, and she must not have dead at the point of a time, right? So the second part of the poem, it was actually telling about how the people are mourning over the death. And finally only two titanic tarantulas, one black and the other with crimson chest, crept with slow hairy steps like the sulkers of the night, howled her off to their invisible liar, right? So on the other hand, so he was talking about a complete painful mourns and sufferings. And then they actually comes to the natural death, that how that finally the two titanic generals, and they were talking about the whole ceremony, that how the dead body will carried one black and with the crimson chest, because they were actually covering the body, they were actually they were then they were decorating the body, right? So they were crept with the slow hairy steps, and by very very slowly they are carrying the dead body. They are actually the relatives, the loved ones. Now they first of all they were crying, they were not able to get about the idea of the death, they are not able to get about death of the Mary. But ultimately the realization will hit them. Ultimately they will accept that how this is very natural thing, how it comes to all. And they were actually they were decorating Mary in the all the beautiful clothes. And now they were admitting that how talking about the natural death, that how the natural death is something which is actually very much which is something which is very natural and inevitable. And on the other hand, they were carrying the body, right, of dead Mary, crept with slow hairy steps like the sulklers of the night, and hauled her off to the invisible lyre. And they were carrying the Mary, and definitely the body of the Mary, or you could say the spirit of the Mary, it will submerge to something which is invisible, right? So they were actually the scene of the, you could say the whole scene is transformed from the ordinary. They were talking about the ordinary death of the person, that how. And then in the third paragraph, love broke into loud lamentations. The mother cried for divine explanations. Mourners swarmed her deathbed. So now there was the scene of the how people reacted, right? So how people were actually reacting over the death of the Mary, right? So love broke into the loud lamentations. The people who are so full of love for the Mary, the Mary was very much dear to them. So they were actually, they were actually crying, weeping. So there were loud lamentations. The mother was all the time crying, and she was actually asking for the divine explanations. She was actually, questioning the divine, that why is she, why the god has chosen Mary, right? And the mourners swarmed her deathbed. And on the other hand, the mourners, the people who are, the relatives, the friends who were visiting the family of the Mary, so they were actually tied to the deathbed, and they were talking, good things about the Mary. A tent was erected, the courtyard illuminated, a tearful vigil was kept up for 2 consecutive nights. And the and then people will carry on, the societal norms, and all the rituals that they were doing. A tent was erected, you know it very well, we erect the tent, and people used to sit on the floor, and they lament over the death for 2 consecutive days. A tearful vigil was kept up. People were keep on having the tearful vigils. They used to sleep, they used to sleep very late, but on the other hand they up at late, and they were talking, and they were actually lamenting over the death of the Mary. Packs of cards were brought, recounters jokes, sympathizers scoffed. But on the other hand, we know it very well that for how long we can, we can carry for, we can carry with the idea of the death. But on the other hand, there will be some parts that people were sitting under the, and few people were actually playing the cards. There will some kind of a jokes, there will some kind of a sympathizers as well, who were talking about the well of the family, who were talking about how good was Mary, how young girl she was. Her body was bathed and scented, utensils were rented. On the other hand, as we have already discussed in the first paragraph, that how she was decorated, and the her body was bathed, they bathed the body, they scented the body, decorated the body in the best clothes, and ready to be carried forward by the you know by the people, and ready for the cremation, or it can be for burying the body. And utensil were rented. And on the other hand, there was a whole, the whole ritual, that the whole community, the whole family will have the meal after the cremation of the Mary, right? So, and utensils were rented. She was dressed in her favorite clothes, adorned with her favorite trinkets. On the other hand, it was a very, it was a very common and usual practice. Then whenever a young man or a young woman died, they used to decorate the body in a best possible way, as if they are decorating a bridegroom or a bride, right? So it actually symbolizes the unfulfilled dreams of that young man or young woman. It also talks about the aspirations, right? So that the spirit will ultimately find peace, and the spirit will ultimately find solace, rather than just wandering, right? So this was the reason they were decorating the body, right? A funeral feast was hosted. And on the other hand, we have already talked about, in the samaskara, that how whole community, the family, will going to have a meal together, right? Church elders were invited, the cortege assembled, prayers were offered, and then there was the whole ceremony of the death, right? So first of all, in the poem, we were talking about that how the people were weeping the idea of the death, right? So in the first stanza, we will be actually talking about that how death is something that we can connect with the grief of someone. But on the other hand, in the second paragraph, we got to know about the reactions, right? So in the second paragraph, the poet was a much more distance from the death, right? And while evaluating the reaction, sorry, while evaluating the reactions of the family, friends, and while evaluating the whole of the the air, the feast, that the air that hangs around the funeral ceremony. And the poet is able to realize death from a very distant point, right? So he's not actively indulged, and with so much grief and sorrow he was writing about it. But on the other hand, he was simply trying to make people understand that whether it is going to be an ordinary phenomena, right, for the people like him, or it can be like extraordinary phenomena for the people like the family of the Mary, the friends or relatives of the Mary. But it is something which is very natural, right? So, and a funeral feast was hosted, church elders were invited. So there was a whole feast was going to be held, in order to to pay homage, or to say goodbye to the dead body of the Mary. The cortege assembled, pairs were often, kawai in the dishes was ordered, right? So kawai is a kind of a pan, right? So it's kind of a dish of a pan that was we, as you are from Haryana, so you must be aware that how after the death of a person, we used to have some meetha together, right? So there was a kind of a meetha, right? So for the celebration that the ultimately the soul will find its it's real about, right? So in the Assam, they used to have a kawai, right? So it is kind of a betel leaves, it is kind of a pan or a betel leaf, the kind of a pan that we used to have with the supari on. So they served the kawai in the dishes. Sermons were shouted, gossips were floated, palms were read, right? So on the other hand, then there will going to be the sermons, those who talk about, the inevitability of the death, the how death is natural, how death is an equalizer, right? Gossips were floated. On the other hand, there will people who are actually gossiping about the idea of the death of the Mary, that what could have happened, what caused her disease, what was the reason of her untimely death, was there something wrong with the Mary, right? So there were a lot of kind of a gossips about the Mary and her family. And then palms were read. So it can be the Psalms, maybe, there was a mistake that on the other hand the Psalms were read. On the other hand, the church priests were reading, the Psalms in order to pay a homage to the Mary, in order to pray for the soul of the Mary. And tea and biscuits were distributed, and then her sudden demise was sadly lamented. And on the other hand, there was an by the end of the events, you'll get to know that there was a sad demise of this girl. And what were the people's reactions? And people's reaction was, such a young girl, such a sweet girl, such promise, right? But on the other hand, we know it very well, it is a very common phenomenon, while talking. And on the other hand, in order to stop people from weeping, people used to say that you talk about that person, you talk good things about that person, it will help the person in attaining the salvation, it will help the person in attaining the eternity with and the union with the God, right? So this was the reason they were talking about, that how she was a very sweet girl, she was very young girl, how promising girl she was. But the astrologists offered some comfort, and they were happy she went so peacefully. And on the other hand, there was more and more distancing, right? The kind of a poem we started in the first stanza, so he was actively talking about that, how even the atmosphere and the environment is also laden with the idea of the death of the Mary. But by the end of it, we come to know that how he was distancing from the death of the Mary, right? And how he was telling about that, how astrologists were actually the people who were actually dealing with the theology, right? So there will be the priest, there will be the church priest, the people those who are talking about the theology, those who are talking about the God, right? So basically all the people those who are related to the church, they're trying to bring comfort to the people, right? They were offering some comfort, that whatever has happened, that happened for good for the Mary, right? So in the end, whenever we talk about the death, we always put everything at the hands of the God, because we don't have any other option than to submit to the will of the God. So they were trying to give some comfort, that whatever has happened, right, that happened for the good. And on the other hand, there is one more thing, that in order to give solace to our heart, we used to say that whenever there is a death of a young man or young person, we used to say that if God loves a person very dearly, then he used to take that person at a very young age, right? So there was also a common phenomena to give solace or comfort to ourselves, when we were talking about that this was the reason that he died young, because God doesn't want him to suffer more and more in this materialistic or in this man-made world, and he really wants his soul back, his or her soul back, he really wants the union back, right? So this was the reason they were actually talking about that, how such a young and sweet girl she was, right? And they were happy she went so peacefully, and in the end, right, so people were actually happy, they were rejoicing, because it actually gives us the message that, right, we should not grieve over the idea of the death. People, we should not run from the idea of the death. It is very difficult to get over the idea of the death of a very loved one, a closer one, who is someone who is very dear to your heart. But on the other hand, whatever has happened, it all happens for the good, or it can be, we can put it in this way, that it is something which is very natural, right? So we should not run from the idea of the death. And in the end, that, as poet was saying, that she went so peacefully, right? So it's all about that, ultimately one day all will go, right? So he was actually talking about the universality of the death, right? So though in the poem he was talking about a simple young girl, right? So there was not something extraordinary about Mary, right? But while quoting the example of an ordinary girl, he was talking about something extraordinary, the big concept, the big philosophical concept like the death. Or you could say that he was also talking about the universal concept of the death, right? So there will be multiple viewpoints that he was talking about, the Mary, that how she didn't get a chance, right? She didn't get a chance to explain the kind of circumstances she just had, and she just went away from the she just went away from the world. And on the other hand, there were the mourners, there were the relatives, there were the friends, right? So they were actually, they were also trying to find a voice. They were actually, the mother was constantly in the, in the grief and in the sorrow, and the mother was constantly in the, dialogue with her own self, with the Mary, and sometimes, with the divine, that what has actually happened with her, with her loved child. And on the other hand, it finally presents that how, the death scene in a very, in a very multifarious, multifarious form, that so he started with involving the, even the environment, by quoting the example of the autumn nights, the cold winds, right? Then he was talking about that how everything comes to the normal thing, because it is something which is very natural, which is very universal, right? I hope this much is clear,
Yes, ma'am.
right? So shall we move to the next poem? Do you have any
Uh,
question?
Ma'am, where can I get this original text? I have seen the modules that is provided by GNU. It doesn't include the original texts.
Okay, so where were you reading the short stories, Shushmita?
Ma'am, ma'am, I have searched the short stories.
Okay, so instead of that, when you go to e-Gyan Kosh,
Okay,
right? So this was IGNOU's e-Gyan Kosh, na, where there was a study material,
okay.
right? Even I believe that, according to, as far as my knowledge is concerned, so the whole study material was mailed to you already, isn't it?
Ma'am,
You
I
got the
haven't received yet.
Okay, so basically you just go to IGNOU's e-Gyan Kosh, right? And
Okay.
or you simply just Google PG diploma study material MEG14, right? So there will be a different kind of, you could say, the different kind of a blocks that we were discussing, right? So there will be the stories, and on the other hand, for this particular, for this particular, when we were talking about this particular course, right? So there will be in the end of it, right? So in the end of it, they have provided a whole textbook, right, where you have the whole text of the story. So I when you were talking about that you have read, so also I was under this impression that you might be reading from that e-text.
Ma'am, I've downloaded the material for MEG 5, 13, 14, but it involves, it talks about the writer, the poets, and all of that. It just mentioned few lines of the poem. It mentions the themes and everything. But I think I have missed that section where original text was given.
See, in e-Gyan Coach, they have given you, they have just given you the superficial information. So this was the reason that these lectures were not about teaching. So these lectures were basically about for your counseling sessions. So I really don't need to teach here. So basically, I might be just taking your queries, right? But on the other hand, you and if anybody could else join that, you are not, have studied. So this was the reason that I might be teaching. But on the other hand, these 5 lectures will be, planned like that you guys will read on your own, and I will just take up your queries. We will discuss
Yes,
the
ma'am.
text. We will,
That I understand, but I didn't know that this kind of lectures will happen or not. I was not
Nee,
aware
I
of
got
that
your
really.
point. Nee, okay, I got your point. This was the reason I myself took the responsibility that, that how much I will try to cover. I'll try my best to cover it, right? So this was the reason. And on the other hand, I already, familiar of the idea, because no text, or you could say, as you were talking about the summary, the themes were not at all available on any of the website,
Yes,
basically,
ma'am.
because these are the poems, or you could say these are, as we have discussed, the poem that was actually written in Khasi language, right? So the regional text, the same way we were discussing about the, Changya Ruk, about Balbir Madhopuri, and about the Sanmati, because the material will be only available, for example, if you go to Shodh Ganga, right, in order to find the research that have actually, done on this particular thing, right? So you
Yes.
might be getting the research in their own language only, right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
you might be getting the explanation of the poem in the Khasi only, right? So this was a reason that, they have included the translation, so that the layman people, we will try to read, and will try to, have as much as in interpretations that we can have. But there was a provision that whenever you go to e-Gyan Kosh, and in the last of the section, right, so they have given all the blocks, I believe 5 to 6 blocks. But on the other hand, there was the last block. There they have uploaded the whole of the e-textbook. you will be getting all the text of the stories, and then you will be having all the poems in the end, right? So
Okay.
though there was no provision of reading tamas or samaskara, or that we have discussed yesterday, Tughlaq, because these are the very bulky books. These are a very
Yes, ma'am.
the bulky text or narratives that we have. But short stories and poems are available in that ebook, right?
Okay.
So you go to Gyan Kosh, that is actually run by the IGNU. That was actually their personal, the official website of IGNU for providing the study material to people. And there you can get you can get easily uh, the text, right? Be it short stories or be it the poems, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So let's start with the stare. Right, stare by Raghubir Sahai, right? So basically the stare is also dealing somewhere down the line idea of the death, as the first line hints itself. But on the other hand, here Raghubir Sahai tried to portray death in a very different manner, right? So the kind of a death that we have talked about in the first poem, that was actually about the literal death, the very natural death, the universal idea of the death. But on the other hand, Raghubir Sahai was popularly known as the conscience keeper, right? So he was actually a poet, right? He was actually a poet who was a very ahead of his time, and he was actually talking about the value of the conscience that we all will be having. And on the other hand, here he was talking about, right, he was just not talking about the death that actually happened and on a very literal, on a very natural way. But on the other hand, here he was actually talking about the common facts about the death, right? That how the illiterate people, the half the half literate people, the so-called intelligentsia of the modern independent media, India, right? So they are also the half dead man, right? Because they have their inner soul, their inner voice, their inner consciousness is totally dead, right? So that we have even discussed yesterday in the idea of the Askaran, right? So you must be remembering about Askaran Charan, that when we last studied, that how he killed, he destroyed, he silenced the voice of the conscience, and on the other hand, he just chose the life of corruption and selfishness over over the true life, right? So here he was also talking about the stare. So basically, stare in Hindi, the real original title of the poem, that was Taktaki, right? So when it got translated in English, then they titled it as the stare. But the real name, the original name, is the Taktaki. So Taktaki is something when we were actually we were actively, we will constantly, and we will deeply engrossed in looking at something, right? Taktaki laga ke dekhna. So that taktaki laga ke dekhna is when your mind, your soul is completely engrossed, when you are constantly not just staring. So on the other hand, the stare can be a very it can be a very surfacial title, as compared to taktaki. But because of the limited vocabulary we have of the English, right? And on the other hand, the same thing that we have discussed when I was telling about in the first lecture, that how in translation you loses the essence, right? So because translation is a very it is a very you could say a very tricky activity, right? So one needs to be very careful about when he was translating a work, especially an original work, right? So when we were even look at it, we were translating actually a Hindi poem to an English, and the whole meaning and construction got changed in a one single moment. So what about the regional languages, right? So this was the reason. But on the other hand, everything has a pros and cons. So here we will be talking about the stare. So here Raghubir Sahai was actually talking about the people that so death doesn't come in the some same manner, right? So it is not about the death of all the people. So it is all about how much dead consciousness a person is carrying in this modern world, right? So he was saying that some people are half dead, some people are quarter dead. So it all depends upon the conscious, right? So because people will be having different kind of a circumstances, right? So different in different kind of a circumstances, sometimes the kind of when we think about Dr. Faustus, the kind of a Faustian, the deal, the Faustian agreement, right? He actually indulged in with the Mephistopheles, that how he sold his soul, right? So the same connotations you will be having in the same in this poem, that how he was talking about the half dead person, right? Let's start, and after that in between of it, I really would like to get your views, that what do you think about the modern age, where people are actually compromising, and they were not less than the dead bodies. The same way you must be aware of T.S. Eliot's poem, that is Hollow Men. There he was actually talking about the modern man, that how modern man are basically a hollow man, right? So they were actually the dead effigies. They are just they were just the effigies, not they were not they were people without the shape. They were actually, shapes and shades only, right? Because of the, moral degeneration, because of the, the dead conscience, right? So same way, the poet is actually urging people, right? So we really need to stare inside us, we really need to look upon us, we really need to look inside us, right? Right. In the last lecture we have studied the same thing when we were talking about Askaran, that how, he snubbed, he shunned, he silenced the voice of conscience. The same way he was talking about, if people are, people are silencing, if people are, destroying the voice of inner consciousness, they even though they are living in this world, but they are no better than a dead person, right? So today's lesson, common facts about death. There are several. Note. Death doesn't come to all of us in the same manner, nor do the dead become equal in the death, for they were not so before. The body is a residue of the struggling, incorporating in itself one battered eating bowl, one soiled hair comb, and the breakage within the only one element to escape is a cry, right? So basically here he was talking about the idea of the death, that today's lesson he was talking about. So today's lesson is common facts about the death. When we were talking about the common facts, so there are different kinds of death, there are different ways that a person is trying to, a person is trying to silence the voice of conscience, a person is trying to destroy the values that he has learned so far in the in the modern world, and sometimes he compromise, right? So what we have studied yesterday in the compromise by Askaran, right? So sometimes they indulge in kind of a compromises, sometimes, as they indulge in the Faustian deeds, right? So they indulge in the Faustian agreements. So same way he was talking, there are several notes. So now he was saying that there are different ways, right? So different ways people are dying, there are different ways people are killing the voice of the conscience. Death does not come to all of us in the same manner, nor do the dead become equal in death, for they were not so before, right? So on the other hand, he was comparing first, in the very first line he was talking about the death doesn't come all to us in the same manner, as we have already talked, that how, different people have different struggles, different people might be they were suffering from the different kind of circumstances, right? So there are different kind of compromises, there are different kinds of, you could say, they are having, a lot of encounters, and sometimes no encounter with the voice of conscious. They, and sometimes the super ego is so much heavy on you, but on the other hand, sometimes you are so dead from inside that there was no voice of a super ego. So this was the reason that he said that death doesn't come to all of us in the same manner. So there will be, the death is not something, which comes in the same manner. Dead person do not become equal. On the other hand, then he said, nor do the dead become equal in the death, for they were not so before. Or on the other hand, he was talking about that how, the dead person do not become equal to after the death, right? So even somebody who is dead, right? We never knew about it, that what would be the future of that person. What is the idea of afterlife? What is the idea of the spirit, right? What has happened to the death? The same way he was talking about that, even though, we compromise, even though on the name of compromise we snubbed our voice of consciousness, we are actually, walking dead on this materialistic world. We are realizing our capitalistic, needs, but there is no guarantee that what we are actually doing, right? We, the kind of compromises we are making, the kind of material aspirations we were actually having, so there is any guarantee of love, peace, or happiness, right? So the same way he was comparing the idea of a living man and the dead man, but on the other hand, he was saying that the destiny, or you could say the outcome of the efforts that the person is, the doing, on the other hand, the faith of both the persons are same, because there is totally, uncertainty. The future is so much, unpredictable. And on the other hand, he was also quoting the example that there is no difference between the dead man and somebody who has compromised, who has compromised in today's world, right? The body is the residue of struggling incorporeity in itself, one battered eating bowl. And on the other hand, he was, comparing that how dead body is actually the remainder after the, struggle of the life. So he was talking about that how, somebody, when somebody has dead, the only thing that on the name of remainder, on the name of residue, you just have the dead body of this that person, right? The same way he was talking about that if you should not, if you compromised with the voice of consciousness, a conscience, and if you lost, the idea of the sane mind, if you, lost count your encounter with the, conscious mind, and you were just simply driven by the desire with the materialistic aspirations. So he was saying that the same way, the dead body was the only residue. The same way, if you are not listening to your heart, if you are not listening to the, the call of your soul, so there will be just left your body, right? So there will be just left your body, your organs that meant for the satisfaction. Same goes with the dead body of the dead man, right? Itself one battered eating bowl, right? So he has given the example, right? So how the battered eating bowl, the hair comb, one soiled hair comb, and the breakage within the only element is to to escape is a cry, right? So he was saying that this, so the whole person, he has, minimized the whole existence of the man, just, talking about that, how, we will be an eating bowl, right? So he was keep on, eating it, or it can be a soiled hair comb, right? Or it can be the breakage, right? So it can be that there are a lot of breakages, a lot of cracks within your personality, right? If you are not listening to the voice of your heart, or you are not listening to the call of your soul, and the only element, right, the only way you can escape is the cry, right? So the only way of the cry. So you must be, aware of the idea of the Dr. Foster's, that how in the end of the hour, how he was crying badly, like the last soliloquy of the, Dr. Foster's, where he was crying that he really wants his, his time back. He really, he was regretting over his decisions, right? So that this cry can be the anguish of the mind, right? So it can be the agony, because no matter what you are, indulging in so many material pursuits, no many, no reason what you are actually, going far and far with their, with their capitalistic aspirations, but in the end, right, the whole thing will cause a lot of mental agony, right? So your mind will definitely be filled with the mental anguish if you are not listening to the, if you are not at all listening to the, call of your heart and soul. So this was the reason that he was actually, warning the modern man, warning the people, that you really need to stare inside you, right? So you really need to stare inside, and even the outside, what kind of a outcome you are yielding, right, with your actions. And you really need to, you really need to, the stare can be the questioning, the stare can be the contemplation, the stare can be a meditative state that he was actually expecting from the modern man, right? uh, which in a sense is an undetermined internal matter still under study. In the end, we send it for printing, not the course but the cry. In the very end, it has turned out a poem in a native language meant to be rendered into the worldwide English language. And then he was talking about, the idea of the same, idea of the death, that, the people will write elegy over you. There might be, there might be a poem over the death of you, but on the other hand, there might be, the worldwide English language. So he was hinting about the idea that after the death, your elegy, your dirge, the notes will be published in a different, the the death note, right? The mutuary was actually, published here and there. The same way he was talking about that, while compromising, while you listen, while not listening to your, the call of your soul, by, snubbing and silencing your voice of conscience, you might be getting good, you might be getting good outcomes, you might be reaping good profits in your life, right? That, like he was talking about, right? So your name will be shining, you will be getting fame, you will be getting money, you will be popular at the end of the time. But in the sense, he was like, that was all, which in a sense is an undetermined internal matter still under study, right? So he was talking about that it was all about the internal matter, right? So though you try to celebrate your life, by having name, fame, and all the materialistic pursuits, and your name will be shining, that, as the notes, as the elegy, as the poems were shining. But in the end, you know it very well that how dead, you are from inside, right? So what were the words on my lips when I died? You seem to know them better than I. You wrote, I had said help, maybe I had said liberty. Now I am dead, I cannot remember. So it is all about, the idea of the actions, right? So the people are, keep on hoarding things, people are keep on collecting things. So he was talking about that, even my, words that I have uttered, right, during the death of mine, will not be, understood by me. So the kind of hoarding, the kind of, possessions I am collecting, the kind of a name, fame, money, wealth I'm collecting. So he was saying it is not going to be useful for me for the dead body. So how can you can think about it? It would be useful for the, the half dead body, where you are, actually having a conversation, compromise and conversation. You seem to know them better than I. On the other hand, there will be the other people who will judge you, right? Who will judge your word, who might be aware of your word when you die. You wrote, I had said help, maybe I had said liberty. So he was saying people will definitely, judge you. People will definitely judge you according to their own lenses, right? So no matter how much you have earned on the name of money, on the name of fame, on the name of wealth, right? So people will definitely judge you from the lenses of lack, right? So maybe you were say, I was saying liberty, that I want freedom, I really want freedom from this life, I'm happy with the idea of the death. But on the other hand, people will portray in a very different manner, right? So people will definitely portray from the point of view of othering it, right? Because people will always target to your shortcomings, right? So this was the reason that you wrote, I had said help, but people will try and portray to you to the crippled being, that how you were in the dire need of help at the time of your death. So it was all about that, the kind of constructions we live in the society, right? So we live for the others. So this was the reason that if you are living for the others in order to recognition or appreciation or acknowledgement for your means, for your wealth, for your fame, if you are living for the others, so he was talking about it is for no use, right? So because there will be definitely a misunderstanding between the others, right? So if you really want to real your own self, if you really want to realize the the meaning of the liberty, the meaning of the self, so you really need to stare inside, right? So you really need to do the taktaki, right? So तुम्हें taktaki लगा के देखना होगा अपने अंदर, right? And you really need to understand and stare the world from a point of a outsider, right? Now that I'm dead, I cannot remember, right? So the same way, right, he was talking about that how your princely possessions will turn to zero, right? All things will come to an end after the idea of the death. When a living literate people pass through a crisis of their own with the object of giving direction to the crisis in a tribe of half dead illiterates, you know how jocular the debt can be if they wish, yet I spare you the question. What makes 100 fat heads hang? The load of wisdom, the weight of reverence, the burden of shame? No, I would not. Sorry, I would continue to stare at 100 bald pates in silence, the mixed stare of my dead machine gun, right? So before concluding the poem, Shishmita, I really would like to, have your idea that how do you, we have already studied two poems on the death, right? One about the literal death, another about the you could say the internal death, we all are suffering from. So what do you think? How do you perceive death? And what do you really want to comment on these two poems, Sushmita?
Um, Ma'am, we have read two poems, and in this poem, it's talking about internal death, and what is I think it's more about what is important to focus. We focus on the outer things. We focus on what other people say, what other peoples expect from us. But what's most important is what we expect to ourselves. Yes, internal death is the right, I think, the right word that we can use for the crisis, the dilemma. In today's time, human is in a constant dilemma. There's something going on in his or her head.
What would
uh,
be the reason of this kind of a dilemma, Sushmita? I would like to know, like, what do you
um,
think that?
I think first of all is expectations. We expect a lot. Sometimes we expect a lot from ourselves. Sometimes the burden of expectations of others from us lead to that dilemma. For
Okay.
example, I'm a student. I'm in a state of dilemma for so many reasons. I have to I have a I have a career ahead myself. The parents wants to get me settled, and there's so much things going on. So I think the right now what dilemma I am facing is that I have expectations from myself, and my parents have expectations for me that are different from my expectations, what I expect for my life. So I think that everyone is in dilemma because of these expectations that we have.
Okay, so you feel that the expectations are the root cause of the dilemma nowadays, or it can be, the root cause of the stress, because we are actually living in, the
Yes, ma'am. It's
modern world.
it's the dilemma is actually responsible for the anxiety and depressions person face. We expect from ourselves, we expect from others. That someone is not behaving with me like that. I have
But you
done
are
so
at a
much.
very prime of your age, Sushmita. There is lot more to come. I believe you have just completed your PG,
Yes, ma'am.
1 year or so, or you have
Two,
just.
two.
Okay, so it's been 2 years. So you are studying for, basically you are preparing for net, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so how many attempts you have given?
Two.
Okay, so you have given this exam, this
Yes, ma'am.
July 2023. Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
what would be your expecting score?
Ma'am, it didn't go well because of some reasons I'm facing for last few
Okay, so
months.
have you taken any kind of a coaching?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so you're just preparing on your own. So this is the best way, right? If you can prepare from the net, that is from the definitely from the self study. And see, when we talk about the career in the English, though people are saying that the English is one of the one of the promising languages because it is the lingua franca of the world, and especially in India, it is one of the most prestigious and reverence languages, right? But I believe career options when it comes to net, and especially when we talk about language, English language and English literature, these are completely two different things, right? So what you have read in the modules of LSRW or what you have read in linguistics or stylistics, right? So
Yes, ma'am.
these things are completely different from what we actually talking about here, right? Because as I've already told in my class that literature is all about discourses, right? Literature is all about interpretations. Even Friedrich Nietzsche says that there are no facts, only interpretations. So it is all about the more and more enlightened mind you have, the more and more educated mind you had, you're going to have more and more interpretations, right? So it was just about you really need to be focused, and it is very difficult, as the whole poem was talking about, that how we are actually living, we are actually half dead bodies. The same idea was proposed by, you could say, T.S. Eliot in 1950s, right? The kind of 1930s and 40s, the England was suffering from the same age that what we Indians are suffering from, the age of dilemma. We all are hollow, that the kind of a moral degeneration, England was actually suffering from the First World War, and the point of a First World War to Second World War, and the kind of the whole moral degeneration they had, right? So we are suffering from the same phase in today's modern India, that we actually lost faith. We actually lost any kind of even faith in ourselves, and we are more and more prone to, you could say, the dilemma, the stress, so the same way, the author is also, the poet is also quoting the same examples, that we are no longer, we are no longer the living beings, right? The literal death is something very different, but on the other hand, we are actually suffering from the symbolic death every day, right? And for example, you are talking about that you are actually in the dilemma, that there might be some people like you, right? So in this way, you should feel that how blessed you are, that you are still studying, and you are still studying the kind of material that you really want to, right? You are studying your favorite subject, right? And you are studying your favorite literature. You are actually enrolling yourself in a different course, even after completing the PG. But on the other hand, there are people who don't even have a say to decide the field, right? And sometimes even they want to pursue a career in something else, but out of a family responsibilities and out of a lot of economic reasons, they're prone to do some petty jobs, right? They have to compromise their first love, right? The first love, their first passion, the first profession, and they are they are prone to, they are forced to join some other field, right? So in that way, life is all about balancing and striking the balance between all things, right? So this is what he was actually talking about, right? That
Yes,
we
ma'am.
living beings are actually half dead bodies, and we are actually suffering every day from the symbolic deaths. So you can visualize those people. On the other hand, this is a very important thing in India, right? Most of the people, those who are not at all happy from their own work, right? So we all have complaints, we all are not happy with the professions, we are not happy with the jobs we are actually having nowadays. So this is what he was talking about, that if you are going against the passion, if you are going against your rules, your morals, your values, wherever you want to have a compromise with your soul, as we have seen in the case of Askar and Charan yesterday, when we were talking about compromise. So they were actually suffering from that kind of a symbolic death, right? So it is very difficult to keep some keep oneself sane, that the WB Yates was actually mentioning in the second coming, right? So the crucial kind of a period we are living in, right? So the same way, I appreciate your thoughts, that it is very natural, right? So we have already discussed that how the few things are very natural, and you are at a very young age, that such kind of a dilemma, stress is a very common. But being the student of literature, I would like to just say to you that you just enjoy, right? And in literature, you can never be master, right? So if we think about it, that we will be the ultimate, we will be the ultimate end of the interpretations. Even Rola Barthes, when he was talking about structuralism, he said that we really need to kill the author, we really need to murder the author, so only then the reader will be born, right? And there will be the multiple readers when you think about reader response. So it is all about that you can you must aspire to always be a student in the literature, right? So that is what I believe the best thing that you could do with your life if you are, interested in this field, if you are interested in English literature or any kind of a literature, right? So the same way he was talking about, so this is very difficult, the kind of things I'm, saying to you, that, aspire to be a learner, aspire to be a student, right, rather than achieving something. But on the other hand, when we talk about the modern, the modern age, where we really, we really evaluate person, as we have studied, when we were talking about on the birthday, where the protagonist was saying that people will judge you from the outside, right? Your social status is much more determined, right? So at a point of a time you feel that no, ma'am, it's all about the job, it is all about the identity, it's all about what you say, that your parents see you settled, right? So the kind of a settled, the term settled is very much important, right? So this is what the poet here is talking about, that it is very difficult to keep ourselves sane and to keep ourselves alive, right, in this, in this world, right? So I just, wish you all the best for all your pursuits, right?
Thank
Let's come back to the poem. When a living literate person pass through a crisis of their own with the object of giving direction to the crisis in a tribe of half dead illiterates, right? So he was, he's talking about that, how the, the literate persons, right, the literate persons, they are also, in the form of crisis. We have already discussed that, how, the modern world is all about crisis, right? Somebody has a crisis about money, somebody has a crisis about fame, somebody has a crisis about identity. So there are a lot of crises, right? Some, even if we talk about, nowadays, that how we are, how we are suffering from the natural crisis, right? So there were so many rains, there were floods going on, in the Himachal, in Punjab and Haryana, there were red alerts, yellow alerts. Delhi is totally flooded with the idea of the heavy rain, right? So see that there are crises everywhere. So it is going to be a man-made, or even it is going to be the natural crisis. So he was, the same way he was talking about that, how the literate people, right? So though we are talking about actually so-called, growth and development age, we were talking about, how we are moving ahead in the technologically advancement age. But here he was talking about that, how the literal people, they are full of, they are actually, they are passing through a crisis of their own with object of giving direction to the crisis in a tribe of half dead illiterates. But on the other hand, these illiterate people, they think that they are the literate people, right? So the literate people are actually, talking about that, how they will be the, you could say, they are going to be the torch bearers, or they are going to be the, the lighthouse for the half dead illiterate. So there are a lot of people, who just blindly follow, like we have it discussed yesterday, when we were talking about Tughlaq, that how people out of devotion they follow their leaders, out of devotion they follow the kind of a godman, they out of devotion they just follow their desires, and whatever they are swept with, right? So the same way he's talking about the kind of a age, right? So we are actually living in the age where literate and illiterate, right? So they're here the literate people, they try to give direction to this half dead illiterate people, right? And the whole situation is very ironical, that where the dead man, in the poem he says that he would not like to ask the question about the hanging heads, right? So here he was talking about that, how, how jocular the dead can be if they wish, yet I spare you the question. So he was like, if a dead man, if a dead man will come and ask you that are you really alive, right? So he was saying that how jocular it would be if a dead would come and wish, yet to spare a question, what makes 100 fat heads hang the Lord of wisdom, right? So he was saying the person who has dead, right, who is totally dead, he is even better than these thousands of living beings, right? Those who are walking on this modern world, and those who are actually professing, those who are professing their wisdom, those who are professing their spirituality, those who are professing their logic and rationale. So he was saying, if that dead person will come and ask you that what makes 100 fat heads hang the Lord of wisdom, that what is the point of your wisdom, right? What is actually the essence of your wisdom, right? For example, we are swept by our scriptures, but on the other hand, if we talk about, if we talk about any kind of a scripture, there is no answer in that scripture, that why that do we really need to use social media? You read any of the scripture, you read any way, the Quran, Granth, Quran, you read any of the scripture, right? So the modern questions, right, the modern man questions, the crisis modern man is facing is nowhere, you could say, is nowhere to be solved, right? Because it is all about from within, right? So this is what the tragedy of, today's modern world, right? So the same way he was talking about the dead man, right? So the dead man is actually better than the living people, right? Those who are walking on the, those who are actually walking, and on the other hand they are actually wandering, right? Because they are in the crisis, so they are just wandering here and there, they were just wandering aimlessly, behind, their material pursuits, their capitalistic needs, their all the aspirations, right? The weight of reverence, on the other hand, he was also, the dead man will also talk about the weight of reverence, right? So you have made everything, right, very small to big details of your life with, you have attached so much acknowledgement, recognition, whether it is going to be the birth of someone, marriage of someone, job of someone, as you have said that you really, your parents really want you to see you settled, right? So everything, right, we have actually attached so much importance to that, right? So the dead person would really ask to, know that what is the importance of such big things, right? What is the importance that you have attached to these kind of a big things, because after that it will not matter in any way, right? And the burden of shame, and on the other hand, the dead man also would like to ask about the burden of shame, right? The kind of, the shame we are carrying, that the shame, what kind of a shame he's talking, I would like to know about you, Shushmita. What do you think that the kind of shame he is talking, the burden of shame?
Ma'am, it could be anything. If he's not able to achieve anything, or has done something that is not right in eyes of people.
Yeah, it is actually like the burden, the shame of being, the shame of being unsuccessful,
Unsuccessful, yes.
right? The shame of the failure, right? That we are failures, we are, we are completely, failed people, we are unsuccessful, we are not victorious, right? So the idea of the success is so much, prevalent in a modern world, that we only acknowledge the effort, we only love to hear the stories, we really need to follow the path of the successful only, right? So you must have seen that how, once a person became successful, everybody, just surrounds around that person, and they ask about, his or her stories, how they prepared and how they got to this position, right? So the dead man, he was talking about that how, the burden of shame, that the kind of it, the burden you are carrying, that what happens to you if you do not, emerge to be victorious, if the path leads to, your defeat, you will be unsuccessful, you will be a lost case, right? So he was talking about that how, the wisdom, the respect, and the reverence, that all the things that we have attached so much to our material aspirations, we are actually, living in this, modern world, the modern hollow world, right? So in this way, the poet really wants to, say that how the dead man, the man who is dead and gone from the world, right, he is much better than this man, though who is actually a living being, right? Though he has a body, he has he has a life and breath, he was emanating with the life, but on the other hand, his life is totally futile, right? If he is not listening to the, the voice of his consciousness, if he is not, he's not looking inside him, and he's trying to correct the actions and try to, follow the path of righteousness. So he was talking about the same thing, right? He was just warning the folks, right? So, and in the end, right, he was talking about that, no, I would continue to stare at the 100 bald pates in silence, the fixed stare of my dead machine gun, right? So, on the other hand, he was talking about that how the dead person, right? So, how the dead person here is actually, the dead man, he's, you could say, he's actually giving you the deadly stare, right? So, the man who is actually, already dead, so he's actually giving a stare, right? So, stare into the, eyes, and stare into the, and while, like staring to people, he's actually sensed that why people are going so much mad, why people are going so much insane for the materialistic aspirations, and for, the idea of the dream ambitions, and the idea of the success, the kind of reverence they have attached to the things, right? They have attached to the titles, right? The reason being is that because of the fear, right? Because of the fear, they really don't want to, labeled as weak, crippled, right? They really want to emerge victorious, and there was a complete fear lurking inside them, right? And they really want to hide that fear, right? And they really want to hide that fear with access of their, you could say, anger, and with the help of violence, right? So in the end, he was talking about that how, a dead man is only staring at the bald heads, right? The bald packs in the silence, right? So because the reason of the baldness, it can be, the bald, because of the stress, and because of, a lot of reasons, right? And in the silence, the fixed stare of my dead machine gun, right? So the had the symbol, right? So the stare is like a dead, or a silent, like a, the dead machine gun, right? That how machine gun who cannot fire, right? So the symbol of the machine gun here, this satirizes the situation of the dead society, right? So even the machine gun is dead. People are so much fearful, right? But they really don't want to fight, right? They really want to fight, but they don't have even the courage, right? They don't have even have the courage to even shoot the gun, right? And unconscious, they are totally unconscious about the crisis. So the dead is conscious about the crisis, but on the other hand, the living heads, right, they are completely bald, they are ignorant, they are stressful, they are devoid from the idea of the light, right? And on the other hand, the dead man is constantly staring. Here the dead man, he is actually constantly staring at these half dead people, the living beings that are walking on or wandering on the earth, and of my dead machine gun, because he cannot, he first of all, he was thinking of shooting the people. First of all, he was shooting the people with the stare or with the machine gun, but even the machine gun is dead, right? Because he knows that very well, that people are not even worthy of death, right? Because they are already dead on this earth, right? So I hope that makes sense, that in the end, that how he was talking about even the dead man, right? A dead man is aware of the crisis, right? The kind of a crisis that has happened to him, that he is no longer here in this world, and he is free from the race, free from the mad race, the rat race. But on the other hand, the living beings, they are keep on indulging in this mad race, in this rat race. They are compromising, they are shutting and silence the voice of conscience, and they are actually living in a very chaotic world, where their just bodies are the proof that they are living, right? But on the other hand, from their mind, from logic, from rationale, from conscience, they are totally dead. And in the end, the dead feels that even the that they are aware of the crisis, and these people, they are not at all even aware of the crisis. They are not at all aware of the consequences. They are not at all aware of even the predicament they are going to have after the death, right? I hope this is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So next is a very short, compact poem, that is the Moment of Courage, right? Moment of Courage by Padma Sachdev, right? So she has written the poem in the Dogri, and it was translated by Iqbal Moj. And the poem is very simple, the moment of courage. So basically, here she was talking about a well, right? A kind of a kuwa. So there she was talking about a well, and she was talking about that one time it was shining, it was brimful, but there came a mishappening, right? By a kind of because of the unpredictable, some few unpredictable or uncertain elements, right? By a calf, right? So a calf got drowned in that well, right? And you know it very well that in the rural India, so this was the reason that well is said to be the cursed one, right? People don't want to go near the well. People were actually avoiding the well. So in this way, basically Padma Sachdev was highlighting the superstitions, right? The superstitions of our society, right? So how we associate superstitions, bad omens, good omens to the things, without even using our much rational and logic. And it was all about the fear. It was all about the half cooked knowledge, the ill cooked knowledge that we have, right? So here the title was the Movement of the Courage. So here Padma Sahai was actually asking for the movement of the courage. She really wants to be the courageous, to go near that well and to have the memories. Though she has a lot of memories of that well, that how she, her mother, and a lot of people go, and they have they drew the water from the well. But on the other hand, because that well is said to be the cursed one now, this was the reason that they are not at all they are not able to enjoy the water of the well. And she really wants to show the movement of the courage. She really want to rejoice the memories that has attached to the well. To the right of our hill there is a well shining brimful, right? So there was a hill, right? So there was a hill, and on the top of the hill there was a well, right? So there was a kuwa which was shining and brimful, as it was shining because on the top of it, and it was brimful. There is you know plenty of water in it. Last year summer covered it with the green and mango blossoms. It tempted a calf when felon and drawn. And there was this sad incident happened, that there was a calf. He got attracted to the mango trees, to the mango blossom, and that calf went to eat the mango blossoms, and to cherish the green. But on the other hand, by mistakenly, and because of some mishappening, that calf fell in the well, and it got drowned, right? So this was the reason. From that day, the villagers, they are actually, adding the superstitions. They are actually, adding or attaching a lot of, ill omens with the well, that how this well is a cursed one, how we should not go near the well, how we should completely prohibit the well, that it has even killed the calf, right? And moreover, there is a very common phenomena in the rural areas, that how people say that, there was a saya, there was the thing, the thing where actually a kind of a death happened. So people used to say that the thing got possessed with that, the dead spirit, right? So this was the reasons, and since then no one drinks of that well. So it is very common that, they have completely prohibited the usage of that well at night. Like a thief, I bathe in it. But on the other hand, as the poetess was actually a child, a kid, a baby, right? So she has enjoyed a lot of, memories with the well. And but she said that, at the night, when there was nobody, nobody was, looking at him, nobody was, following her. On the other hand, she very slowly, she went to the, well, like a thief, and I bathe in it. I cup my hands and drink. And she was actually, craving, she was actually craving for that memory. So it was not just about the thirst, right, that she has for the water. So it can be the thirst for the memories as well, the kind of a warmth, the kind of a memories that are attached to that well for the poetess, right? So this was the reason she said that I cup my hands and I drink. And by drinking it, she was able to, she was able to, relive that memory. She was able to relive that experiences that she has, with the well. But love is not quenched nor thirst. But on the other hand, this was a very sad thing, because she actually, remembers the past memories. She really wants the, good old times to be back. But the love is not quenched nor thirst. On the other hand, she was saying, just by cupping my hand, just by drinking it, and, drinking like a thief, drinking, at the night, in that silent world. So nothing, not my love, not my thirst was actually, you know it actually, satisfied because of that, right? So the poem is actually, a very sensitive poem, right? So though it is a very small and a very concise poem, but it actually talks about, it's a sensitive poem that actually talks about, the relationship between the nature and the human being, right? That how, the well, and, the death of the calf, which is very, very common, right? The well was there, the water was there, and same thing, the death was also there. We have already studied two poems related to the death, right? So it talks about, the very natural, environment, and man's, the human's relationship with the nature, right? And it also, gives a lot of, glimpses of the village life, that how, villagers are full of superstitions, yeah, because, they are living away from the hustle and bustle of the, the urban land. But on the other hand, that they try to, they try to associate, presume things on their own. They try to, build a lot of good and bad omens in their mind, and very small things, right? Very small things that they think that it can cause any harm to them, so they completely, wipe that things, or they promote that things, on the name of superstition. So that was all about, the idea that in the darkness. But on the other hand, there you can see that how there is a different contrast metaphor, right? So in the darkness, so she is able to assert the courage, right? So in the daylight, she was not allowed to go there in the broad daylight, right? So this was, but on the other hand, at night she feels more courageous, right? So when she was away from the stare of the society, when she was away from the vigil of the society, right? So this is what she was talking about, right? In the deep dark of the well, there are wistful shadows waiting for the maidens who hung a rope on its nail but never came back to draw water. The dark of the well longs for that moment of courage when, in full sight of my hands, will stretched out for a drink, right? So in the end, she was talking about, the movement of the courage. She was saying from that time, when the calf got drowned, so there was a nail in the rope that actually wants to be pulled out, right? So the actually it was the well, right? So well was actually, craving for the human touch, well was actually asking people to show the movement of courage, and not to just despise, prohibited the well on the name of superstition, on the name of, the bad omens, and to not, associate any kind of, you could say, the considerations that the villagers might be having on the name of, the ghost, the ghostly spirits, or you could say the ghost image of the of the well, right? So the well here is to, he was actually awaiting for the day, right? So he was talking, in the deep dark well there are wistful shadows waiting, right? So there the well is actually waiting, the well is actually waiting for the day that then when full sight of the people, right, it will have, people will come, they will, have their hands, they will drink water, and people will give their voice, or we give their love to the well, right? So here Padma, Sachdeva was actually using that, how, even the nature, nature was actually, it has equal attachment, with the human beings, right? It was not just human beings who are, attached to to the material things, to the natural things for their comfort and convenience. The same way, even the nature has a very close connections with the human beings. But it is a very sad thing that the things, those who are actually, serving our comfort, those who are actually giving us good profits, we used to, worship that things. But on the other hand, if there is an ill will like this well, right, so we used to, attach so many superstitions, we used to attach so many of bad omens with such kind of a things, and we prohibited the use of that, right? For the maidens who hung a rope on its nail but never came back to draw water, the dark of the well longs for that moment of the courage. So here, the actually it was the well who was actually waiting, when in full sight of my hands will stretched out for a drink. So he was saying, whenever I really want to know, I really want to draw, I really want to stretch my full hands and draw my hands towards the well, I was really, thinking of, a big drink, I was really thinking of drinking the water, I really want to, relive that moment, I really want to have a full sight of the villages around the, well. But it is because of the superstitions, it is because of a lot of things, the illogical, considerations people, having in the mind. So this was the reason that, not only well was suffering, Padma Sachdev was also suffering, right? So there was a touch of sadness, in the poem, that she was actually, putting in a very sensitive manner, that how well, and she was suffering because at the cost of the human beings, right? Those who are, those who are full of superstitions, those who are full of such kind of, the false beliefs, and this was the reason that how, they both got affected, right? I hope this much is clear, Shishmita.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, let's just quickly go to the next form, that is kitchen, because it was very much, longer. So this was the reason I just pasted the pictures. I hope the text is clear, Shushmita.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start with the kitchen by Vimla, right? So as the title, hence the same thing. So it recalls about, the domain of the kitchen, and when we think of the kitchen, right? So kitchen is the ultimate domain of the housewives, right? So it is ultimate domain of the woman, the first home of the woman, right? And it was all about the training of the women, right? And so in this poem, even Vimala, he was actually, recalling all the incidents related to the kitchen, and he was actually, actually highlighting the sufferings of the housewives, right? That the how the, the women, in particular, in the woman, as I have already told you, that how, kitchen is actually the domain of the women only. So the how the women are, laden with the household responsibilities, right? Women is just meant for the kitchen, right? So just for the cooking, for the aromas, so the whole things, right? So she, in a very plain language, right, so she was talking about that how, the kitchen is not just the domain. So she was actually, comparing the kitchen with a cage, with a cage, that how women are confined in the four walls, right? And there is no, there is no equity between the household chores, right? So it was just the woman, right? So same goes with even working women. And now there is a lot of change, right? The waves of change, changes are, the waves of change are coming. And nowadays, men are, equally, they are, sharing the responsibilities, especially the household responsibilities. There are a lot of chefs, those who are men, and they are, men even started glorifying the idea of the kitchen. But when the poem was written back, how she was talking that how kitchen is actually a cage, right? Though it is said to be the most celebrated, part of our, of our house, and it is most prized possession of a, of a woman's house, right? So she loves to decorate the kitchen, she loves to do everything, right? So kitchen is actually a place full of aromas and beauty, right? But on the other hand, she feels that how, women are overburdened, women are laden with the household responsibilities, and men are not ready to, they are not ready to share the the household responsibilities with the woman, right? So I'll just quickly start. This kitchen, how wonderful, wafting aromas, how it makes mouths water like an open shop of sweets, right? So she was actually, giving you the significance of the kitchen. So very common, simple, colloquial language, right? So it is very wonderful, wafting with aromas, because every day mother, and usually the women, right? So women are usually cooking in the kitchens, and and the kitchens were full of aroma. It makes mouth water, and the children, especially the men, they were actually, they were actually desperately waiting that what would be plattered like an open shop of sweets, as the open shop of sweets, right? So there were sweets every there, and the people got tempted to eat it. So same way she was talking about the kitchen, right? It breathes spices. Incense from the puja room wakes in the morning to the noise of a churning butter or vessels being scrubbed, right? So she was actually talking about the very basic activities that were actually held in the kitchen. So it breathes spices. So whenever you enter the kitchen, you get the aroma of the spices and incense from the puja room, and there is a very common construction in everybody's house that the puja room will be just adjacent to the kitchen, right? Or it can be the open or opposite to the kitchen. So there will be the incense, there will be a very good fragrance of the incense that was coming from the puja room, right? Wakes in the morning, right? And it was the kitchen, right? So rather than, she was saying that the kitchen is the ultimate thing that wakes people up, right? So wakes people up because one day she was churning the butter, or sometimes she was cleaning the vessels, scrubbing the vessels, right? So this makes this wakes people up. The earthen oven gets a fresh, much wash, decks herself from the burning, from the small change in the box of spices and seasoning. And you could say that how women's life, right? How all the women, and the women, especially when we were talking about, Vimla was talking about the Indian women, right? That how the lives of the Indian women centered around the kitchen, right? So be it the washing of the the oven, they try to get it again and again, though the whole thing was completely burnt, but they keep on giving it a good wash, and on the other hand, and they keep on shifting, different boxes from here and there of the spices, of the seasoning. They keep on shuffling and shifting the things in the kitchen in order to make their life, viable, in order to make their life flexible, and in order to make their wife something, life there something, pleasant and happening. And we bought ourselves sweets, played house, played at being cooks with jaggery and lentils. It was a magic world. The kitchen snared my children, remained a spell of passion. On the other hand, she was talking about we bought ourselves sweets, we played the house, and we being at the cooks. On the other hand, she was talking about the young girls, right? That how for the young girls, kitchen is actually a training center, so this was the reason that she was talking about, that we bought ourselves sweets and we play house, right? So there was a kind of a games, ghar ghar, every young girl was playing in when, the constructions were completely different. They played at cooks, you try to cook and they try to serve. So it is going to be a kind of, the, you could say, the internalization that Simon de Beauvoir was saying, that how a woman is not born as a woman but becomes one, right? So even kitchen is one of the construction, right? That actually, yields in making of the woman, right? So that actually, that gives rise to the, construction of the woman, because the young girls, when they see their mothers in the kitchen, all the time cooking and cooking, then she herself got, the kids, the young girls herself got enticed, that they started, having the idea of the identification with with the mother, right? Especially the young, especially the girls, right? Because if we talk from the point of view of psychoanalysis, right, the Carl Gustav Jung, when he was talking about the mirror stage, right? And the transition from mirror stage to symbolic stage. Well, first time, then a person is introduced to the mirror, then he got aware of the individuality, and then come the symbolic stage where he was, started identifying himself with the same gender and sometimes with the opposite gender, right? So here the young girls are very much, started identifying with the mother when they continuously see their mother, working in the kitchen, working tirelessly, cooking something, plating and serving people with a lot of things, right? With jaggery and lentils, it was a magic world. And she was thinking about her childhood, childhood memories, that how young girls, they play this house game, and jaggery and with lentils, they pretend that they are cooking, and there was a magical world, the fantasy world, the magical world they try to create, while playing house, and with all the kitchen tools, even the kitchen accessory, the kitchen toys are very much, famous with the young girls, and every young girl, right? When we were talking about the kids, especially the young girls, the kids, they actually have, the kitchen set, kitchen set in her toys, right? So this was a reason that she was talking about, that how, when she was a young girl, when she was a small baby, how she was playing, and how she was able to create a magical world with the help of kitchen, with all the tools and all the toys of the kitchen. The kitchen snared my childhood, remained a spell and a passion. On the other hand, she told about that how, the kitchen snared her childhood. So there was a lot of impact of kitchen on her childhood. As I've already told you, you are also a girl, so how it is important for girls to learn cooking, right? So there was no, you could say, compulsion on on the boys, on the men, but there was a compulsion on the women that you really need to learn cooking, right? Because the idea of, the patriarchy was so much, so much, you could say, visible in the minds of, be it a woman or a man, because they really, try to imbibe the idea that ultimately you will be the one who will be cooking in someone else's house, right, after the marriage, right? So this was the reason that the kitchen, I have spared my all childhood there, and it remained just, spell or a passion. Wisps of childhood shadow lifted, it is no longer a playground. When she, and then she got to know that how, when she became, when she became aware, and it was not at all a playground, right? She got to know that how much confined she feels herself in it. And she really feels sorry for her mother, that how, her mother could have done better things, if she moved out of the kitchen. But on the other hand, they taught me kitchenness here, right? So look at it, a very, a very interesting and a quaint phrase that she has used here, the kitchenness, right? So the kitchenness is very much important for the construction of the lady, right? So the one of the lady, like her feminine or grace, when we talk about, grace, feminine of the woman, right? So this kitchenness is should be there, right? You must learn cooking, right? So you really need to learn cooking, right, in order to make men impressed, right? So this was a reason that she was saying that how it is a training center, because they taught me kitchenness here. My shaping started, mother, grandmother, all the mothers in my house, they say learn their motherhood here. And when it comes to, women, kitchen is the ultimate domain, and motherhood is the only profession, what I believe, right? So the same way she was talking about that how, not even the mother, grandmother, or was saying that, or were burdening her with the idea of the womanhood, with the idea of the motherhood, right? So this is what ultimately you are meant for, right? Our kitchen now is a graveyard with corpses of all kinds of tins, dishes, sacks is hang there in the smoke, clouds from the damp firewood. On the other hand, there is a complete shift, complete change when when she became adult, and when she became, aware of the making of a woman, right? That how, the boys can easily, wander around, they can go with the friends. But on the other hand, for a woman, especially for the girls, we believe that you should enjoy making tea, right? You should enjoy making some sweet, you should enjoy, you should, enjoy yourself in making the roti goal, right? So it is a very much important thing that as you really need to learn as, sine and cos theta. So as much as important is that you really need to, make the goal rotis, make the round rotis there, right? So this the dawning of the knowledge, when she was aware, when she became aware of the knowledge, so she felt that the kitchen, which was a playground, right, which was actually a training center, and from playground to training center, to it has completely, turned out into a graveyard with corpses all count, tins, dishes, and sacks, and whatever, the tins, the dishes, and sacks, for the poetess, right? So she felt that these all are the dead bodies, right? So they are just the, the dead bodies, they are not the living beings, right? So the dead bodies who were actually there for centuries and centuries here, right? It hangs there in the smoke, clouds from the damp firewood, and there was smoke, there was this firewood, right? So it gives you the whole, the it gives them the environment of the, you could say, a graveyard of a crematorium, the fire, the smoke, it gives her the environment of the cremation ground. Fierce despair, silence lurking there. Mother floats like a spirit. She looks like a morning kitchen herself. Her eyes rain out of the tears ago. Her hands worn out with endless scrubbing. Looks she does not have hands anymore. And then she was actually, highlighting the, the pitiful condition of the woman, right? Especially when she was talking about her mother, that her mother was full of fears, despair, silence lurking here and there, right? So there will be a lot of fears and despairs, and definitely the silence, right? The mother has no right to talk, and the only domain she has, right, the only thing she has to be worked about, right? Even when we talk about, our mother, even when we ask, our mothers, right? So the only question she has, that what to, what she should cook, right? If you woke up, right, she will ask you that what would you like to have in the breakfast, and in the, in the afternoon, she was asking that what would you like to have in the lunch, and even in the evening, the most complicated question and the most difficult question of the day is that what would we like to have in the dinner, right? So look at it, the kind of, the kind of situation that, every mother in India's household is actually, the facing, right? The kind of, and she looks like a morning kitchen herself. On the other hand, she was like, when I look at mother, so she was just, simply a being, simply a being who is working in the kitchen. Her eyes ran out of the tears long ago. Her, and when we were talking about her hands were coarse, her hand was hard, as if she has no hands because of the scrubbing, because she was constantly doing the household chores. She looks like a ladle, a bowl, a piece of kitchen brick and brass. Sometimes she looked like a flaming oven, sometimes a trapped tigress. Restless, she paces the kitchen floor, bangs pots and pans. So this is a very common, common sight of a mother in the kitchen, right? So sometimes she was actually, putting and banging the pots and the pans, when she got angry, and sometimes she was just, she was just roaring from the kitchen and complaining and scolding the kids, and sometimes she was, putting all her frustration, from the kitchen. So the same way she was feeling that had her mother gone outside, had there were, there will be people who were sharing the household responsibilities, then the whole scene would be different, right? How easily they say, with the flick of the ladle, the cooking gets done. No, none comes this way except to eat. And on the other hand, for the other people, they say that it is a very easy thing, very easy thing to cook, very easy thing to cook, and then just plate the things. On the other hand, she said that nothing comes this way. Nobody was there to help the mother, nobody was there to share the responsibilities, and just people were there, just there in the kitchen, just to eat something, right? My mother is the empress of this kitchen empire, but the name of the pots and the pans is my father, right? So this is the very much irony, right? So my, though the mother was the empress, though the mother was the ultimate queen of the kitchen's empire, she was running the business, she was running the kingdom very efficiently. She was the all pervading, all pervading energy, in the kitchen. But on the other hand, it is a very sad thing that the names on the pots and the pans is of my father, because ultimately the father is the provider, right? It was the father, right, who bought the ration, who got the things done. And a very patriarchal mindset we used to have, that whenever we buy something, we always put the name of the, the man on the that utensil, right? So fortunately, they said, I fell into a good kitchen, gas stove, grinders, sink and tiles. I make cakes and puddings, not old-fashioned things like mother. Still, the name on everything is my husband. And then she gradually, she became more and more aware of the, the crucial, you could say, confinement. How she was actually, how like her mother, she doesn't want to be confined to the four walls, right? For the kitchen, it is no longer a playground. But on the other hand, the kitchen is like a graveyard. The kitchen is like a cage, right? Where she feels that, people were actually, people were actually giving her compliment, that you should be happy that you have a good kitchen. You should acknowledge, you should be grateful that you have a grass stove, you have a grinder, you have sink, you have a tile. Earlier the people were actually grinding the floor. They were doing so much of hard work with their hands. And on the other hand, you will be have a modern woman. You cherish the idea of making cakes and puddings, not making the old fashioned dishes like your mother. But on the other hand, she feels that still the name on everything will be of my husband. My kitchen wakes to whir and hisses of the grinder, the hiss of the pressure cooker. I move like my modern kitchen, a wind up toy. My kitchen is like a workshop, and it's like a butcher shop with its babble. But on the other hand, she was saying that though my kitchen is a very, we have a, a modern kitchens, we have a very, different, modern kitchens. And there she was saying that there are a lot of hiss and whisk of the grinder, pressure cooker, there she was, the modern kitchen is like a toy, wind up a toy. You can just wind all the things up in the cupboards, and there will a complete clean and neat look, right? That as if you come out of from some factory after accomplishing your, after accomplishing your task. But on the other hand, she said that it was like a butcher shop with its babble. So it is like that, it is a butcher shop where she is actually, killing or murdering her real self, right? So she was actually, feeling that she was the one who was butcher here, who is actually, murdering or killing the real voice, the real self. There's no identity, just that she is just limited to the kitchen, washing what has been washed endlessly, cooking, serving, scrubbing, and washing. And on the other hand, the endless cycle, cycle of cooking, serving, and scrubbing and washing. There was a kitchen in my dreams, the smell of the spices, even in the jasmine. Damn this kitchen! And she was thinking, I was obsessed over the idea, right? Even in the dreams, as I have already told you, the continuous question that we got from our mothers are, what would we like to have in breakfast, dinner, and and in the lunch, right? So the same way she was saying, the kitchen was there in my dreams, right? All the time I'm so much burdened with this household responsibilities, right, that I start feeling insane about, the very little things about the kitchen. Inhuman, it sucks our blood, robs us of our hopes and the dreams. And now in the end she was talking about that, how, it was the kitchen who robs her of the, identity, hopes of the woman, right? A demon, a vulture, eating us into bit by bit all our lives. Kitchen culture, kitchen talk, reduced to kitchen maids and kitchen cooks. On the other hand, how she was talking about that, how the whole culture, right, the women are just limited to the kitchen culture, kitchen talk, right? Have you watched the short film on the YouTube that was available, Juice, Shishmita?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Right?
ma'am.
So it's the same thing, right? While I was teaching you the same thing, that, kitchen talk, kitchen culture, there were some snippets that keep coming on to the mind of me, that how, there will people, right? So there was just a woman that she was all the more sweating, and on the other hand men were actually chilling, and they were discussing about politics, and they were discussing about political leaders over the, over the cooler, and they were actually, thinking about to get the things platted one by one again. And there this woman, she was actually struggling to get the fan, right, in so much of the heat. The same thing she was talking about, how the women is just limited to the kitchen culture. All the women will just, they gather around in the kitchen, and they will talk, about the kitchen things. They will all talk about the kitchen politics, what we have reduced to kitchen maids, and their identity is just reduced to, they are just the kitchen maids and the kitchen cooks. Let's smash these kitchens for making ladle wielding our duty. No more names on kitchen things. Let's uproot these separate stoves. And on the other hand, in the end, she was talking about banishing the idea of the kitchens from the identity. She said that if you really want to be independent, if you really want to, make progress, if you really want to assert your identity, if you really want to find yourself, you really want to smash kitchen from your identity. You really want to believe that kitchen is not one of the necessary trainings you should have in your life, right? So this was the reason that she was saying that let's smash these kitchens by making little wielding our duty, and we should be free from our duties, right? So what they are doing is not at all their duties, because it is the, most less paid job that they had, right? So this was the reason that she said that there was no point of performing this duty, right? No more names on the kitchen things. Let's uproot these separate stoves. Our children are about to enter these lonely kitchens. For their sake, let's demolish these kitchens. So here, our children, she was actually referring to the young girls. So she was saying that if we women, we carry forward the culture of the kitchen, the culture of the kitchen talk, we carry forward we carry forward the idea of educating our women with the kitchenness, right? While teaching them recipes, by giving them the idea, and the duty of managing the kitchen. She will say that our daughters, the young girls, will definitely suffer. She said that our children are about to enter these lonely kitchens. So lonely kitchens where there will be no help, right? The men are completely, the men are completely immune, they are completely insensitive, and sometimes they are not even aware that such kind of a duties needs to be shared, right? So this was the reason said that she really doesn't want the young girls, the young daughters, to enter the kitchen lonely in this solitary cage, right? And come for their sake, let's demolish these kitchens now. So in the end, she was talking that that's for their sake, right? For the betterment of our, the future generation, for the young, for the young girls. If we really want to, make them independent, so the idea of kitchen, the idea of kitchenness, the kitchen talk, the kitchen culture should be abolished, right? So we demolish these kitchens, right? So it should be an activity, that has equitable distribution, right? So it is not just the duty of a woman, of the family, right? So it should not be laden just on the women of the family, right? That these are the women, right? These are the mother, And these are the mothers, these are the daughters, or these are the sisters, or the wives will do the kitchen things, right? So it should be, it should be taken as a shared responsibility between man and woman, because it is because of the kitchen, right? So their real identity, their real identity is somewhere lost, right? And they have just reduced to the, like the cooker, pressure cooker, they just reduced to a kind of, pressure cooker, every time scolding and bubbling, so they just reduced to this, a zombie, they have lost the insanity because of the overburden, because of the overburdening of this household responsibilities. I hope this much was clear, Shishmita.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, so it just quickly end our last poem, right? It is just of two pages. Do you have anything to say, any questions in the poem?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, let's just quickly wind up the last poem, that is by Just Once Try, that is in the Bengali by Shakti Chattopadhyay. So here basically he was talking about the idea of the love, right? So same way that he was talking about that, how, the modern man, the modern society, whenever we talk about it, and how we are devoid of, even the the voice of conscience, the same way there is no love left nowadays, right? On the name of love, you could say there is a name of, lust. On the other hand, there are so much, love lost marriages. There are so many, in any relationship, be it any kind of relationship, be it we have with our parents, we have with our siblings, we have with our friends, we have any kind of a relationship, so there people don't want to shed love, right? So people are very much guarded. I hope you agree with me, Shushmita, that how people are very much guarded now. They don't want to shower love, they don't want to share love, because they are under the constant, pressure, or you could say they are under, constant threat, that, because they feel that by showing love, they might feel they are vulnerable, they are weak, they are crippled, right? So this was a reason that, in the end, Shakti Chattopadhyay was just giving the idea that we should just try, right? At least once try love, right? So there is a very famous dialogue that of one of my favorite, films, that Me Before You. There was also a novel as well then, where she said that we cannot change people, right? We can simply love them, right? So it is just about that Shakti Chattopadhyay was asking, right? So we can simply love people, right? And at least we try once to love them, right? So the same thing, I will quickly conclude the poem. Just once try to love, you will see stones drop and scatter in the river from the heart of the fish. So the same way he was saying, ki in any kind of a situation, right? So though the modern world is going towards, a hard society, they are actually, going towards the loveless society. There is no love, much love left between any kind of a relationship. But he said that at least you can try once, right? On the other hand, we are living in such kind of a society, we are living in such kind of a time where, love is really a hard way, very hard way to come by, right? So people don't want to fall in love, because they don't want to make fool of themselves, because they feel that, the idea of loving someone is making fool ourselves, so the whole thing, right? But on the other hand, Shakti Chattopadhyay was also, he was just the he was promoting the idea of the love, right? So you will see that stone drops and scatter in the river from the heart of the ship. So he was saying the most difficult task, right? The difficult task is the stones, right? The stone hearted people will melt, there will be the miracles. You are able to create a magical reality if you follow the path of the path of the love, right? Stones and waters of the river and sea, blue stones turn red, red stones blue, just try to love, right? So on the other hand, he was talking about on the stones, right? So stones are the stone-hearted people, right? The stone-hearted people, or it can say the thick-skinned people, right? So the rivers of the water, he was saying about the crypt, the waves, right? So the waves that our hearts are actually feeling. He said that we really need to, go with the flow, right? Go with the flow of the love. And the sea blue turns red, and the red turns blue. And he was saying the sea blue, the sea blue can be the idea of, as I have told you, your warmth, right? The warmth of, sea blue is a color of warmth. And we said it can, the warmth can be transformed into the red, right? So the red can be the passion, right? So if you let your, if you let go of the idea of the hardness of your heart, and you embrace love, so definitely you feel that how this warmth can be transformed into affection, and ultimately stones and red stones blue, and blue is actually the symbol of something royalty, and you will definitely try to create a magical reality by loving someone. Just once try to love. It's good to have some stones in your heart. The cry is then an echoed back. So he said that it is good that people are actually, full of, they are actually full of thoughts, they are full of dilemmas. There will be some stones at their heart, but he said that the cry is then the echoed back. But in the other hand, the more and more stone hearted you become, there will be not a voice of, there will be no voice of warmth, there will be no voice of consciousness, there will be no voice of, love will be left in the on the. You will be having the cracking sounds, you will be having the, the sounds of the, how the grinding of the stones, right? So you will be just having such kind of a harsh and, the cacophonic sounds that comes from the stones. Since all roads are slippery, the stones may be spread on them one after the another, like the naked use of poetry or the waves and the image of the, comatuli, with all her sparkling barricade and tinsel. But on the other hand, he was talking about the similar idea that how roads are slippery. It is very difficult to invest ourselves in love, right? Because you cannot predict love, and you cannot, predict love from someone, and love is something, it is not at all investment that has, that has the guarantee of reaping good profits, right? So he said that though the roads are slippery, it is very difficult to trust people, to love people, to spread the idea of love. But on the other hand, he said that the stones may be spared on them one after the another, because the same way he was saying why the stones are slippery, because these people, right, on whom you are investing, they might be suffering from something, right? They might have the bad experiences in their life, like the naked use of poetry or the waves are the image of the goddess Kutli. And he was saying that whenever we use about, when we use about the poetry, whenever we use about the, waves, and even, we are, talking about the decorating the goddess with the tinsel, we really need to, do it very carefully. He said that even every minimal activity that we are doing, we have to do it with care and caution. But the thing is that we should not give up, right, on the love. I can reach and see distant door of the pale star of autumn. On the other hand, he said that I can already see the results, right? That I can already see that we can actually have the glimpse of the pale star, right? So there might be some hope there if we choose the path of love, right? And just, shed down our the idea of too much hard on ourselves. It's good to have some stones in your heart. There is no letterbox, messages can be left between the stones beside. One sometimes feel like making a home. On the other hand, he was saying, see, it is good to have some stones in the heart. On the other hand, he was keep on saying that it is good to have some doubts. It is good to have some vulnerabilities. It is good to have some, the guards. But on the other hand, he said that you just remember that if you keep on going like that, there will be no letterbox, right? So there will be no messages, there will be no, love messages from your loved ones. There will be no love and warmth from the loved one, because if you shut the door, the person ultimately will shut the door, right? So this was the reason that one sometimes feels like making a home. The stones in the heart of a fish are slowly finding their places in your heart. We need everything we build, houses and home, shall raise a lasting pillar of the civilization. And on the other hand, he concludes the poem that how, the civilizations, the civilization is made, because of love, right? So the people are saying that it is made with the strength, courage, valor, and it is made because of the wars. But he said that the civilization, the lasting pillar, that the lasting pillar, the everlasting pillar, the only thing that we need in order to create a civilization that makes us more human, that makes us evolve from the, the savage to humans, that is the love. He said that we need everything, right? And it's everything, the core element is the love, right? So this was the reason he asked people to not to give up on love, and just, and just give one chance to the love, right? So loving one another, spreading, he was actually spreading the, the idea of brotherhood. And maybe one point of a time he was actually, referring to a woman that you should reciprocate, you should reciprocate my feelings, you should love me back, even you should, quit, you just not give up on me, you should not just quit like that, at least give him chance. But on the other hand, on a metaphorical level, he was actually, asking, all of us, right? He was just giving the, the advice to all of us that we should not give up when it comes to the idea of love. When the silvery fish is gone scattering stone in the waters, just once try to love. And then again, by the way of giving the idea of the fish, right? He was giving, the fish can be compared to our spirit, right? The slippery spirit, as the fish is very slippery in the, in the water, and she was all, and on the other hand, she's very free in the water, right? So he was, again and again, he was talking about the same wandering self, that our spirits, our wandering selves are like these ships, right? Like the fish, right? And we are also, the slippery our spirits, right? So when our slippery spirits, they will actually, ultimately, while, when we when we shed the stones, right, when we shed our, stone heartedness, when we completely, remove the barriers that we have created on the name of caste, creed, gender, and we have made this kind of distinctions, if when we end such kind of a distinctions, when we remove such barriers from our heart, right? So he said that the only thing, right, that they really need to try that, just once try to love, right? I hope this makes sense.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Do you have any query? Do you have any questions, Sushmita?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so I hope your course is completed from my side, right? So we have tried to cover as much as possible, right? So I have covered the iconic tests. So already we have covered, Tamas Samaskara and, Gavishka Natsipulak, and even we have discussed, at least four stories, and today we have discussed five poems. I hope, my lectures are helpful to you when you read and even when you write your answers. And all the very best for your future. And I really wish you the best, and
Thank you,
keep
ma'am.
on reading and, enjoying literature, because, and as you know, I would like to end with the same message, that will always be a learner, right? Always be a student in literature, because it is actually like an ocean, right? So every time you dive, every time you dive, and you feel the depth, right? So you feel the depth is much much more, and when you come out, right, you definitely come out with something very much sustainable, and come something which is very much a valuable, a valuable possession that you will be having in the form of discourse or interpretation, right? I hope you find my lectures, helpful, and you will use the discussions and the elements that we have discussed, in the different stories and the prosaic work in the poetry, right, in your
Yes,
answers, right? So all the
yes,
very
ma'am.
best.
Thank you.
uh, जी सर, हो गया है, आई गेस दैट इज ऑल फॉर टुडे.
हाँ, ठीक है मैम, थैंक यू। आपका शायद ये लास्ट